You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. Okay, I have Rebecca Newton on the show today. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist located in LA. Rebecca specializes in working with couples and with women struggling with infertility, pregnancy, and early parenthood. She is driven to support families before conception begins so that they have the tools to thrive through these difficult transitions. She believes in providing care and support to all families to strengthen the next generation. Rebecca approaches therapy with a warm, rational, yet direct approach. All things I love. All right, so today we get into all of this, all of her work. We talk about getting off and back on track as a couple during major life transitions, particularly parenthood. We talk about how the family unit changes when baby arrives, and we discuss how to handle the ever-changing division of labor in the household. And I will offer a trigger warning as we discuss infertility, miscarriage, and how both affect your couplehood, and what to do about it. All right, this is a great one. Here's Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to talking with you. I've followed you on TikTok for a while now. And actually, I didn't so much plan to ask you about that, but now that I've mentioned it, what has that experience been like?
Oh, wow. Yeah, TikTok's been quite an experience for me. I'd been on Instagram for quite a long time, and I switched over to TikTok earlier this year. And initially, I thought it was really great. I love the video format. I love the more kind of natural, speak from the moment, less planned, less perfect kind of version. And I still really enjoy that about TikTok. However, as TikTok has grown, it just really puts you in front of a larger audience. And that's brought up some things that I didn't anticipate, both positive and negative. I've connected with a lot of really great people. And a lot of people are on TikTok, and people, say a lot of mean things in your comments, and there's a lot of negative stuff that happens, which I hadn't really experienced before on Instagram or other social media. So I've had to kind of adapt and really figure out what my voice is there and how I'm showing up as myself. And it's been a big learning experience.
I bet. I mean, I feel like, especially given the type of content you make, you could be unintentionally pushing some buttons, and especially behind the mask of a computer or a phone. Yeah, people just do not hold as much back when they're in that comment section. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of couples therapy can be triggering or upsetting or controversial. And when I'm working with somebody in the office one-on-one, I have so much more information about them, and the way that I can work with them is so specific. But when I'm generalizing something to put to the masses on social media, it's different, and it doesn't apply to everybody.
Right.
And I don't know people's specific situations, so it's just very different than working with people one-on-one.
Yeah. Well, and you have 15 seconds to explain an entire idea.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very limited by time. It's very limited by like what you're trying to get across, because I'll try to get across one small idea versus when I'm working with a couple in therapy, like it's very rich, and we're talking about a lot of things. So to really simplify something in couples therapy down to one idea is basically impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So why did you become a therapist? Why work with couples? Why do what you do?
Yeah, I really always wanted to be a therapist. That's all I ever wanted to do. And my idea of what a therapist looked like when I was much younger was different than what it's turned out to be, but I'm actually quite happy with what it's turned out to be. But essentially, I have this idea that everybody deserves love and connection and positive interactions and positive support and community. And the way that I do that is through working with couples and families. And I mean, it started very long ago, just seeing friends interact, seeing family members interact. It was just something that was sort of inside of me initially and has developed over time, over the years, um, to be where I am now. And kind of my more recent reason for doing the work that I do is seeing the impact that big transitions have on couples. So from going from a dating couple to getting married, potentially trying to start a family and have children, to becoming parents, there is a lot of room to go wrong. There's a lot of room to make mistakes. There's a lot of room to get off track. And when a couple gets off track, they get really unhappy, and that impacts them. It impacts, children if they have any. It has these kind of far reaching impacts that I think is normal and natural, but also there's a lot that we can do to help. And so I really want to help families feel strong, feel connected, feel loved, so that their children have high self-esteem and feel loved and feel connected and can grow up to be adults who can enter into healthy relationships and be loving and connected.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how my desires to be a therapist have evolved over time.
And I'm certainly going to ask you to elaborate on a lot of that. But I am curious, what did you think it was going to be like that it's now different?
Yeah, I think originally looking at what a therapist would be like, I looked at sort of the glamorous side of it, of you sit in an office and you hang out with cool people all day and you give them advice and you help them, which yes and no, like is maybe a very tiny percentage
Mm-hmm.
of the work that I do, but that's I think how I envisioned it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the reality is I'm not really just sitting and hanging out with people. There's a lot of work that goes into it on my end. There's a lot of thought and planning and paperwork and phone calls and training and the whole business side of it and all of that that is the less glamorous.
Mm-hmm.
But I've actually found that I really enjoy that too.
Yeah, yeah. Um, all right. So when you're working with couples, are they cognizant of the challenges they're facing, or are they just coming to you like something's wrong, help?
I would probably say both. I have some couples who come and maybe don't have as much self insight, and they're just sort of are sending out like their signal flare SOS. We need help. Something's not right. We're disconnected or we're fighting all the time. But I find, at least in the area that I live in and with the age group that I see a lot of like millennial age people. There is a lot of self insight. There's a lot of just sort of general knowledge that's come around about couples therapy and couples work, and the Gottmans and Esther Perel and
Yeah.
all these big names in the therapy world have written books for just the random person. So there's a lot more knowledge. And so I probably three-quarters of the couples that I see come in already with some sort of self-diagnosis or trying to pinpoint what's wrong, at least to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the other things I want to touch on is that I asked you a question and you answered it, so I don't want to sound as though you that you left this out, but just in thinking about the younger generations, I mean, I'm a millennial, so thinking about some of us millennials, and then certainly I think the younger generation, I also feel that there is a movement towards seeking therapy before you're saying, hey, here's a problem.
Hmm.
Would you agree?
Yeah, there's more preventative um, people seeking therapy before there's a problem. But I would say still, those people still tend more towards individual therapy. I get more
Okay.
individual clients that are saying, well, things are mostly good, but I just want a support person. When
Mm-hmm.
when it's couples coming in, there's something about the two people agreeing, we need this, we need to schedule this in our busy lives.
Yeah.
We need to commit to doing this together. It still is when there's a problem, or often when there's been a problem for 5 years already, and
Yeah.
then we're seeking therapy, and there's a lot of resentment that's built up at that point that needs to be undone.
Mm-hmm. And then sort of, thinking of working with couples who are, like you said, primarily maybe experiencing the transition into parenthood, or, newly married, or another big life transition. Um, I noticed on your site, it says let's learn to be a team again, or something about team, and I want to know from you, what does team mean in this case, and why do you think we lose sight
Mm.
of that sentiment?
Yeah. The way that I kind of conceptualize it and see happening really often is when we're just dating somebody, there's a lot of room, or even when you're early married, there's a lot of room to still be individuals. You can kind of do your own thing, keep each other up to date a little bit, but if you have different interests or different schedules, it doesn't really impact you that much.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people in the millennial age bracket have entered into these marriages saying, we split things relatively evenly. We both do tasks around the house. We're a very like equal marriage. It feels really great. And then they have kids, and then their first child is born. And just as a whole, moms, women are still taking on the majority of the tasks. They get longer maternity leave. I have dads that have gone back to work after 2 days of their child being born because their whole work idea is that like they can't take time off, the work concept. So there's people going back in to work really quickly and losing touch with the family. And then what happens is, as soon as you are a family unit instead of just two individuals, it gets much harder to have different schedules and to
Mm-hmm.
be on different pages, because you can no longer operate really independently, because you have this third little person who is literally dependent on you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so if one person works late, it automatically impacts the other person, because the other person then needs to either be home with the child or figure out childcare. If one person gets sick and has the flu and needs to be in bed, guess what? The other person has a ton more on their plate now.
Mm-hmm.
If one person needs to travel out of town for a business trip, if one person loses their job, any of these things that as a two-person couple wouldn't be as impactful suddenly become much more impactful when there's a child involved. And it really throws off the balance in relationships and leads to them feeling much less equally balanced. And I think that that's a shock for a lot of people once they have kids.
Yeah. Yes. I think just yes to all of that. I mean, I'm thinking even back, when my husband and I were dating, newly married, regardless, we were living together, and if he had to travel for work, particularly if it was just for a night or two, it was like I was almost, a little excited. Like it was like, okay, I can eat whatever I want for dinner, and usually that meant just like hummus and wine, and I can watch Housewives, and I can, it was like just a nice night to get some alone time. And now it's like, now when he needs to go out of town, I still have that, the excitement for that aspect of it, but there's like this, yeah, there's this whole other piece of the kids, and that time being different. But also what I was thinking of is that when I flip that, I can never just go out of town. It's
Yeah.
not just, hey, I want to take a trip here this weekend, or, thankfully work doesn't require it of me. But for me to go out of town, it's like the amount of hands and people involved and the planning that I do. It's like, you know, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. And I just, you don't even think about that when you enter into this. Well, I don't think it's enough to like not be a parent, but it's certainly not an aspect of it that I thought about at all.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's the surprise aspect of that that's really hard to switch from feeling, oh my gosh, we have this great relationship, to suddenly feeling like the majority of the burden is falling on you, or the majority of the planning is falling on you, and to feel really tied down to family and tethered to family, and not be able to just go and disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really also appreciated what you said about, um, the millennial thing. It's like, I feel like we are, I'm assuming you're a millennial. I said,
Yes.
wait, okay. I feel like, yeah, we sort of had this mentality of growing up, like we were going to be the generation that did it differently. We were going to be the generation that, you know, obviously we're going to college. Obviously we're getting this great job. And obviously we're going to meet a partner who's going to meet us halfway, and there's no more just I take care of every laundry nook and cranny. It's okay, sure, I'll wash it, but you're going to put it away, and all these little things. And when yeah, and then we have a kid, and it's like we just get, I'm thinking of, and I know you'll get this because you're on TikTok, but it's like it's that audio that's like, what happened to the original plot of the movie? It's like,
Yeah.
what happened here? It's like we just get like whipped right back into who we said we weren't gonna be. And that,
Hmm.
I love that you just said it out loud and said that it's shocking, because it is, and it pisses me off.
Yeah, which I think it should, because we were told something like, you can have a family and you can work and you can be this awesome career woman. And then the reality is, the societal support and structure didn't change along with that.
100%.
So you're here and you're a mom, and all of a sudden you're trying to work, and there's no support and structure that will allow you to do that.
Yeah.
And as a mom, you get judged either way. If you're
Mm-hmm.
working too much, you're judged because you're not plugged in enough at home, and the stay-at-home moms at school are like, how come you didn't bring a special Halloween treat for all the
Right.
kids? Or if you stay at home, then it's like, okay, well, how come you're not living up to and getting a job and whatever? Like, there's not that valuing of the choice that there
Mm.
should be. There's not valuing of the domestic labor and how hard that is. And there's not a valuing of when somebody doesn't want to do that and they want to work, that yes, somebody else is going to have to come in and take over that domestic work, because you can't expect somebody to work full time and still take on all or the majority of the household and childcare tasks.
Yeah.
There's not enough hours in a day.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the judgment is a huge part of it, but I also, what was coming to mind as you're talking, because obviously I'm thinking of my own experience, it's like, it was reminding me of when, like we're kind of, I felt pressure to make the decision to stay home or stay at work. It's like it's almost like you have to, in a way, I felt pressure to make that decision before I really understood what I was deciding.
Yes.
And it was reminding me of how, we expect, college kids, 19, 20-year-olds to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. And some of them, no. And great. But it's like, then we just hand people this degree and we're like, go do, and it feels very similar. It's like we hand someone a baby and we're like, oh, you want to stay home? Great. Here's your ticket. Oh, you want to go to work? Hey, here's your ticket. And then if you want to change your mind, it's like, I know people who have made that shift. I don't think seamlessly is a word, but they do it. But it feels like this huge change and shift to then
have to decide before you even know what parenting is or what, and I think it's also, and I'll shut up in a second, but it's like we also, I think, glamorize what it means to be a stay-at-home mom. And then when you're in the trenches of it, it's like, well, this is not what I signed up for. It's not lattes and yoga pants. Like it is, but it's not,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's this whole ignoring, I think, culturally of the domestic tasks.
Yeah.
The diaper changes, the washing of bottles or pump parts, the putting away dishes every single day for the rest of eternity. Those tasks are monotonous, but they are the most important thing in keeping a family and a household moving forward. They are essential tasks, but there's no value on them, and so nobody's really talking about them. So when we look at the idealized version of a stay-at-home mom, yeah, it's play dates and drinking lattes or margaritas or like a pool day, and it's fun and it's crafts and Pinteresty. But the reality is, maybe you haven't showered, maybe you don't know what time it is, you haven't brushed your teeth yet today, you're working on your first cup of coffee and it's 5 hours into the day and you can't seem to remember to even drink your coffee in the morning, and you feel scattered and you're changing diapers, and then the baby needs to eat, and then they need this, and you get lost in that. And I think by not talking about it, we're also like showing how valuable it is. If we don't talk about it, we can kind of pretend like it's not important. But it's necessary. Like it is the heart of what's happening in every family home everywhere.
Yeah. Two things are coming to mind. One, even just mentioning diaper change, it's like, I know plenty of men, my husband included, who will change a diaper, but if the diaper thing, the diaper caddy or whatever needs to be filled, it's like, babe, where are the diapers? Like doesn't know where they are, or doesn't buy them unless I ask him to, or, even just, it was like a whole thing saying, teaching him how to redo the diaper pail. It's like, take the bag out and do the whole thing. It's like that whole mental load piece of maybe partners, husbands, spouses, whoever are doing the things, but it's like the whole setup of the thing that they're doing is falling, I think, primarily on the maternal figure. And the other thing is that, and this is something I've been working on, is, I'm not getting a promotion for the amount of diapers I change. I'm not getting a raise. So it's like at work, I had a very clear understanding of what I needed to do to A, feel successful, and to B, be recognized for it. And now, yes, I know my family, my husband appreciate what I do, but it's not like I'm getting the bonus or the promotion or the peer review or whatever. It's like, just go do, and great job. Like, that's it.
Yeah, this is one of the most important and probably one of the first things that I'll often work on with couples if they have a young baby, is looking at how to provide that positive feedback to each other, because you're not getting it from anywhere else. And being a parent is the most unrecognized role. Kids are not thanking you. Maybe they will appreciate a little bit when they're older, but a baby is certainly not thanking you. And you and your partner are in the trenches. And so nobody's thinking to say, wow, honey, you did a really great job soothing that baby. Or, wow, thank you for changing that diaper. That was so helpful. Nobody's saying that because everybody's drowning and everyone's just trying to stay alive. So one of the most simple things that couples can do is provide more positive feedback to each other, to say, look, I see you, I see what you're doing, and I value it. And it's really hard and it's messy and it's not glamorous, but I see it and I love it. And thank you.
Yeah. Are there other things that we could be doing? Because obviously now I'm asking for myself.
Yeah. So even just what I just talked about is kind of based off of John and Julie Gottman's work. So they're couples researchers, and so they have some great little tidbits because they've done some of the most extensive research on new parent couples that's been done. I don't use their framework in my couples therapy, but I do think they have some great little nuggets of wisdom. And so that's one of the things they suggest: the positive culture of appreciation, voicing appreciation for each other. There's something that I think they do a little bit, but I've sort of morphed off into my own thing, I have a task distribution chart that I give to new parent couples, especially when there is an imbalance in the labor. What I suggest is you can kind of make your own. If you go through an entire month of your life, just kind of jotting down the things that come up, the mental tasks, the emotional tasks, the physical tasks, everything, right? From bringing income in to soothing a sick child at night, to noticing when you run out of toothpaste and toilet paper, to planning and cooking meals, remembering family birthdays, booking appointments, like everything, bringing in income, mowing the lawn, taking out trash, like any task that happens within a 1 month period, write it down or jot it down, or even just spend some time thinking about it. I know that there's some online that you can Google and get a little bit of help along the way for a task chart, but going through it with your partner and saying, who does what right now? And then looking at how balanced is that? And I always use the word balance because I think balance is more important than splitting 50-50, because everybody's work situation is different. Everybody's family situation is different. Everybody's capacity for what they can take on is different. And so I don't want to say split this 50-50 because most families don't do that. Right. What I want is I want it to feel balanced for both people, so that, yes, both people are probably going to look at it and say, holy cow, I have a lot on my plate. Because you do, because you're in the grind with little kids. There is a lot on your plate. There's more than what you can complete in 24 hours. But if it feels balanced, like I know I'm contributing a lot and I also know that my partner is contributing a lot, that's where it feels important. And that's where it feels like everybody's valued. And the more clearly defined those roles are, if you look at the chart and say, okay, this is how it is right now, what's a better way that we can balance this? Can we tip the balance a little bit so it doesn't feel one-sided, so that it feels pretty split, right? So a task that's daily, like washing the dishes, is going to be bigger than a task that's done every few months, like changing the oil in the car. Those tasks need to be balanced differently. It's not a one-to-one swap. So we really have to look at it big picture, what makes sense and what seems balanced for both people, and use people's strengths to split the tasks. Like, hey, I'm really good at this type of task or these tasks, and you're really good at those ones and you don't mind doing them. So let's just split it that way. And then the tasks that nobody wants to do, like, cleaning the toilet, then we have to, flip a coin on that, or we have to like say, you get that one, I get this one. But really spelling it out so that it's clear and that it's defined makes it a lot easier, because then it makes the things that are invisible visible.
Yeah. And the first time you said right now, and I understood what you mean now, but what I initially interpreted it as was whatever we could decide can change.
Yes.
We're not deciding on forever.
I say go over it if you have a baby, you should be going over a task chart every couple months, because every couple months that baby's going to be in a completely different phase. Maybe as they get past the first year, you can slow that down, but it should never be, even with, older kids, it should still be something that maybe a couple times a year you look at and redistribute as needed, because work schedules change, kids schedules change, different family responsibilities pop up. So yes, it should be something that is flexible.
Yeah. And I think just kind of going back to what we were saying about this millennial ideal of things being split, I think initially and a while ago I would have said, yeah, I want to split all this stuff 50-50. But there are certain tasks that I hate doing so much that if he just did those, and we've talked about it, I don't mean this to be like a dump on my husband. Like, we've talked about them and he's taken some of them off my plate. But it's like, just knowing that I don't have to do that, whatever it is at the time, I'm so much happier to do even 2 to 3 more things that I was doing before, because the one I dread is just no longer a part of my daily life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations and then try it out, see how it goes, and be willing to flex and adjust, because then there's no losing there. There's always winning. Like, you're always going to be moving in a more positive direction if this is an open dialogue.
Yeah. All right. So I've now kind of treated this like my own therapy session, but kind of, I think we've talked a lot about now sort of bringing in a kid, especially, sort of rocks the boat in terms of, you know, roles and tasks and, the sort of need to reevaluate those things. What else changes in the dynamic when we bring in a kid?
The sense of self. And I think we are more acutely aware of the transition for a female person or female identifying person becoming a mother than we are for guys. They also go through a huge transition. As much as the role in society for moms isn't really clear, the same for dads. It's not really clear. We don't really know what we expect of dads. We know that we don't want them to be like they were in the 50s, where they just went to work and they didn't participate and they didn't touch the kid or change a diaper. We know that that's not their role anymore. But we also haven't really fully given them the new role. We say, oh, we want you to participate and we want you to be involved, but their work structure hasn't changed. There's still just as many demands at work. And then now at home, there's a lot more demands being placed on them, a lot more desire for them to be involved in the family, and they may or may not know how.
Yeah.
So what I find is a lot of guys need some coaching, and women, I think, as a whole, tend to be talking about this just a little bit more, even more so now. Like 10 years ago when I had my first child, nobody was really talking about it. Now I see people talking about it a lot more. I think women are a little bit more aware of that transition of, I'm not my old self anymore. I'm trying to figure out who I am and I'm on this journey. It's hard, but I think they're a little bit more self-aware of it. But I think that individual change for both people really it's something that comes up all the time and is a big, big change.
Considering I have a mostly female listenership here, what do you think they'd be surprised to hear about what it's like for the men in transitioning into that father role?
That I hear from dads a lot that they are struggling with self-esteem. They are struggling to understand how they fit into the family. They become a parent and they see their partner, their wife, really just figure it out, and have these natural, not all the time, but in general, like have this natural nurturing that they're able to find. They can hold a baby and figure it out. They can soothe them. And so much of the time, dad feels left out. And if he doesn't know how to communicate that, what he'll do is pull back and pull away and go and hide and maybe work more hours because he doesn't feel valued and doesn't see that self-esteem at home. Because again, as society, we haven't really given a clear path for dads and what being a dad that's involved looks like. We expect them to do it, but we haven't told them how. And I think that they feel lost a lot of the time. And mom's so busy paying attention to the child and trying to figure out her own process. She's like, I don't have time for that. I don't have energy for that. You need to figure that out. Go figure yourself out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, and, given what, just generally speaking, sort of the cultural standards for men, it's not very macho for them to come and say, I don't know how I fit in here, or I'm feeling left out. I mean, that's not, I don't know of any guy that I know that would be willing to say that and open up with that. And even just the first phrase out of your mouth was, they struggle with self-esteem. It's like, that's not something we've really given permission to men to feel and to experience. Yeah.
Yep. So they cover it up and they hide and they withdraw, and then they withdraw from the family, and then mom feels alone and she feels disconnected and lost.
Ooh.
It's a vicious circle.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, another aspect of your couples counseling is working with couples experiencing infertility. And I have not gone into this with anyone yet, and so it was funny to me. I was looking at your website, and one of the frequently asked questions was, can a marriage survive infertility? And that shook me because, I've not experienced infertility, but it was like such an eye opener for, oh my gosh, like I've never even considered that would have been a possibility, but how could it not be? I mean, can you talk a little bit about what the couples are feeling and what you wish, more people knew about someone going through that experience or a couple going through that experience?
Yeah. I think the way that it impacts the couple that's not seen so much is how, like, there's always going to be blame, essentially, right? It's very medicalized. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of tests. One person, or occasionally both, but one person is diagnosed with infertility. It's either male factor or female factor or unknown, right? And once it gets assigned to one person, the amount of guilt that comes up internally for them is huge,
Mm-hmm.
because by the time they've gotten to this point, they've agreed as a couple that they want to have children. They've been trying, depending on how old they are, for 6 months to 1 year or maybe
Mm-hmm.
longer before they go see a doctor about it. They go to the doctor, and the doctor does tests and tries to figure it out and diagnoses the infertility. And to feel that there's a sense of betrayal by your own body.
Mm-hmm.
My body's not doing this thing that it should do or is supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of feeling. And my body is not performing this really important thing that my partner wants, or that me and my partner have decided. We planned our future out. Our future included a child, and now I am not able to give them that. Whether the partner is thinking the same thing is kind of irrelevant at
Right.
this moment, but in that moment, the person is experiencing an extreme sense of guilt and a sense of responsibility for holding them back as a couple.
Mm-hmm. So, mm, so how, like, what does it look like? What does that healing start to look like? Like, are we talking about, I guess I just want to clarify and understand. So when you're working with couples in this situation, are you working with couples who have learned of infertility issues and now it's like we have to cope with, um we're not having our own biological children, like, or because I feel like there's also even just, not even just, but there's also probably a lot to process when you've learned that there's infertility issues, but now you're going to explore other avenues. Like, I feel like there's like a fork. It's like, are we just going to decide to not have children at all, or are we going to explore other avenues? And I feel like that will probably look very different. The ways to get
Yes.
through those experiences is very different.
I will say, up until now, everybody that I have had coming to therapy is facing the infertility diagnosis and continuing to pursue how can we try to have children, whether it's IUI, whether it's IVF, whether it's, some people have chosen other avenues like adoption, or
Surrogacy,
foster,
yeah.
surrogacy. Yeah, like there tends to be a little bit of a process, right, where people are starting with minimal intervention and working their way up, and either they get pregnant somewhere along in the process, or they move up to the next level of intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't work, eventually, yeah, there comes a point where, if they've been at it for a certain number of years and the emotional toll is huge, if they've been working at it for a long time and they're not making progress, yeah, they are faced with that decision. Do I need to switch over and choose to pursue this forced childless life
Mm-hmm.
and figure out how to be okay with that and how to make my life feel meaningful, even though I'm missing this piece that I intended to have? Or do we keep trying and keep trying and keep trying and keep experiencing this emotional distress of being in limbo and putting everything on hold and waiting for the next thing in the timeline?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you suggest, you know, let's say I have a friend or a family member that's going through this right now, like what are some things to say and some things to really not say if you're trying to support someone, kind of struggling with that?
My list of what not to say is very clear.
Okay.
Do not say things like everything happens for a reason, or if you just relax, it will happen, or if it's meant to be, it will be, because that, first of all, is incredibly invalidating. But second of all, saying things like, if you just relax, it'll happen, kind of put the on the person, like, oh, it's your fault that it's not happening because you're so stressed and focused on it, which is so untrue. It's something biological that's happening. It is beyond their control. So those are some of the things not to say. Don't dismiss it. Don't say, oh, just relax. Some things that are useful to say are, I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. You can say things like, I don't know that much about infertility because I never experienced it, but I would love to be a support for you. If I ever say something that's harmful, can you please let me know so that I can grow and I can take ownership for what I've said? Mm-hmm. Because one of the biggest, hardest experiences for people that are struggling to get pregnant is being surrounded by people that are talking about how easy it is to get pregnant, or, oh, I got pregnant so easily, or, oh, my cousin's pregnant and she didn't even try. Like, hearing those things and being faced with the constant pregnancy announcements and baby pictures is really, really hard for them. And I think the hardest part of that is when the people doing this are not acknowledging for the person struggling to get pregnant how hard it is, when they're just really overlooked. So I think even being able to say, I may not know what bothers you, but I really, really want to understand it and I want to be a good friend. So can you please give me that feedback if you're willing to? I'm here and I want to try to grow and learn and be a supportive friend while you go through this. I think that can be so meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in, the process of, well, so infertility is one thing, but are you also working with couples who are experiencing miscarriages?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That, anytime you're working with IVF, it's a very, very common occurrence where either they are initially, the pregnancy is taking, the embryo's implanting, and their numbers start going up, and then it doesn't continue to grow and they lose the baby, or they're implanting and it's not sticking at all and they're getting nothing. And all of those are really impactful, because what we don't realize is when you're just trying to get pregnant, the old fashioned way, you're not aware of everything happening.
Right.
So if sperm meets egg and is released without implanting, you have no knowledge of it. You think a cycle was just missed and you're like, whatever, and you go about your day.
Yeah.
With IVF, you are involved and every single aspect of the process is so medicalized. You know that there was an embryo. You know that there was a fertilized embryo that was placed. Ugh. And you have hopes and dreams attached to that, no matter how hard you try not to. And so when it doesn't take, it is absolutely a felt loss. And, associated with IVF and fertility challenges is a lot of miscarriage. And, that's obviously something that as a whole in society is still very, secretive and not talked about and not acknowledged, and is really, really impactful for the person experiencing it.
At this point, since conversations are happening, I think, more frequently, but still not enough, like, why? Like, I don't, again, I have not experienced a miscarriage, and I have, my heart goes out. I just can't understand why there is still so much secrecy. I will clarify it by saying if the couple chooses to keep it to themselves for a reason that feels comfortable for them, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the couples that maybe feel pressured to keep it secret or feel shame or feel, feel like they want to talk about it but don't have a safe space to, or like I don't know, why? I don't why?
Yeah, I don't know if I have the magic answer to that, but I think it's still something that's really happening. I agree with you. More people are talking about pregnancy loss, miscarriage, early miscarriage, the impact that still has, and really starting to value supporting people that are experiencing that. But there still is so much. I think it just takes so long for these sayings to die that people talk about, like, oh, you're pregnant, don't tell anyone until after the first trimester because the chance of miscarriage is much higher, which truthfully it is. The chance of miscarriage is higher in the first trimester. But when I'm working with somebody, I frame it as tell the people that you would want to be there to support you if you lose the baby. Like, that's what's important. Tell the people that are your support system because you're going to need them.
Yeah.
And this whole don't tell anybody, you're right, makes it sound like it's something to be hidden, and it shouldn't be. Like, it really shouldn't be, and we shouldn't make people hide out and not share that. If they don't want to share it, you're right, that's up to them, and that's fine. But for people wanting to share it but feeling embarrassed or shamed, there's nothing more sad than watching a mom experiencing a miscarriage not share because she doesn't think people are going to take her grief seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, and that's, I wouldn't have thought this if you didn't just say it, but I feel like generally we're very uncomfortable with grief. And so I think you even just saying that sort of helped answer the question, right? Because then it's like the person sharing the information has to either feel so secure with the person they're with that regardless of the answer that they, like you said before, can maybe express, what, that might not be the right thing to say to me right now, or know that they're going to get the response that is appropriate. But it's like you have to kind of be prepared for either one. You have to be prepared for someone who maybe totally tenses up and has no idea what to say and says the wrong thing or doesn't say anything. Because we don't talk about it. So, I don't know. It just breaks my heart for women going through that alone, or especially like single moms who don't even have the partner there to support them. And I'm curious though, how do some of these dynamics then start to play out within the couple? Like, I know with infertility, we talked about blame, we talked about guilt. In the case of miscarriage, are they the same?
I would say a little different. With miscarriage, it's more comes down to how does each person in the couple experience and process grief?
Yeah.
Because it's probably different. Because you're right. Grief, everybody handles it different. Some people are really great with it. Some people are not. Either way, it's painful. It is painful emotions. And as a whole, in our society, we don't like to acknowledge the painful emotions. We want everyone to be happy and positive vibes all the time. We don't like sadness. We don't like anger. We don't like guilt. We want to sort of shove those off to the side. So when you're in a couple and you have a loss, you're each going to process that grief in a different way. And it can feel like a betrayal in a way. If one person is in more of an emotional state, they're maybe feeling raw and vulnerable and angry and sad. And maybe the other person is dealing with the grief by checking out and detaching in that moment. Maybe they're going into work more or they're going with friends more. There's this big mismatch that feels like a betrayal that maybe with time can sort itself out if both people are able to, process the grief eventually. But the not acknowledging difficult feelings and processing it in a different way and a different speed can make it really difficult for a couple to recover.
And I mentioned earlier, kind of unrelated but related, that I watch Housewives, and the Salt Lake Housewives, the couple there, she talks about how initially you're just seeing her husband saying, I want more kids, and she's like, no, I'm done. Like, our oldest is like 10 or whatever, our youngest rather is like 10 or whatever. And then she goes on to share that they experienced a stillbirth, and that she was, very much sedated and wasn't really part of the experience. I mean, it was horrible, and she expressed that, but she was kind of like, didn't see it and doesn't remember it very clearly, but her husband had a front row seat and was totally conscious for all of it. And it's been a storyline of her basically like, go see a therapist and work this out. Like, us having another baby is not going to replace or fill the hole, or it's like you have to process that loss, and us just having another baby isn't going to like put a Band-Aid over it, or it might put a Band-Aid. It's just not going to heal the wound is really what I'm trying to say. And I think I'm reminded of that, obviously, because of the sentiment of our conversation, but also that this idea that, like, kind of the suffering of the dad that we don't talk about a lot. And it's rare in my conversations that I'm sort of having sort of these, oh, poor dad feelings, but it's like, we just don't let men process. We don't make it okay. And I think as a result of that, a lot of men just keep validating us in not allowing for it, because they don't do it and they don't push through and they don't, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think it's circular in that way, in that we can say, oh, poor dads, like, they kind of lose themselves too, and nobody talks about it and nobody acknowledges it for them. But then what's the impact on their partner? Their partner is then experiencing their partner pulling away and detaching, and they're feeling their load grow, and they're struggling and being crushed under the weight of responsibilities and over functioning and taking on all these roles. It's circular. It affects everybody, and we can't approach it from just one side and just helping one person. We need families as a whole to have more support and more structure that just doesn't even exist in the United States. And it's sad because everybody's suffering.
Yeah. All right. So I'm running low on time here. So I want to get to sort of, I guess, more generally speaking, and you can certainly base it on anything that we've talked about already, but coming out the other side, right? So we've either gone through infertility, or we're seeking couples counseling, or even postpartum therapy. What are some of the things that either couples or individuals can look forward to getting out of the experience?
Okay. Coming out on the other side looks like, I'll speak specifically to couples therapy, because that's just where the biggest part of my heart is. But couples coming out saying, we feel connected, we feel loving, we thought our relationship was on the tracks to divorce, and now we're happy. We're feeling connected. We're repairing after a fight. It's not the elimination of all fights and conflict. There's still going to be conflict, but we feel like we can resolve them. We feel like we can come to resolution and conclusion, and we feel like we're both being accountable to the relationship. We feel like the relationship is more balanced. That's what's on the other side of couples therapy that is so important. And it's skills that you don't just get in the moment. Those are skills you take forward for the life of the relationship. So as more transitions come, maybe you have enough skills that you can apply them and make it through without, hitting a big speed bump or falling apart.
Mm-hmm. And what do you wish, sort of out there in the narrative about couples therapy that you wish would just stop, that you could just wipe away?
Probably like what we talked about earlier with people waiting too long to come to couples therapy. If you come to couples therapy on the edge of divorce, it's much harder to recover from. It's not impossible. It's just when you come and you're already at that point where you think, I don't even know if I want to be with this person anymore. And you go and you sit with that therapist not only has to stabilize the relationship, but then they have to go back over the years and help you repair all of these moments that are stuck in your mind, all of these times where you had a big fight and somebody said this or somebody did that. All of this built up resentment that's stored in your memory has to be addressed. And it's a lot more work versus coming in sooner rather than later. It doesn't have to be completely preventative, but coming in when you're just starting to hit some rocky times and realize we're having a hard time solving these fights. We're having a hard time coming to a resolution. We're having a hard time understanding each other. That's when you should go see a couples therapist because they can help you figure out what's going wrong, where you guys are getting off track, and what skills you need to get back on track so that you don't build up years and years of resentment and you can hopefully stay more in that loving space and just grow forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you had written to me in some of the questions that I sent to you that it like, there's still this idea that therapy, especially for couples, is like this last ditch effort. It's like just, or that it's, I think still just generally as a whole, because I hear this a lot from, your colleagues that whether you're an individual or a couple, it's like something has to be like wrong with you. Something has to be really wrong. And you have to, and I find it interesting because a lot of times when you think about individual therapy, and you hear that sort of stigmatization, it's like someone feels like because they don't have a mental illness, that they don't need therapy. And it's like, you're probably not going to get, a diagnosis on your relationship. Like you're not gonna know. You're not gonna be like, oh, this is we have a codependent relationship and that requires therapy. Or like, it's like just the way that the way that someone who's an individual might get that in some sense. So I feel like particularly for couples, it can be tricky to get into it. I think that you're battling not only your, the societal messages, but also what each person within the relationship is associating with the need for therapy.
Yep.
Yeah. No question.
Absolutely.
There. Just
statement.
Just on my soapbox. I had coffee right before this, Rebecca, so I'm like, what else can we talk about?
I love coffee. I
know. All right. I know. I feel like I was going to laugh. I feel like I've been like asking you some very heavy questions. I think, the only other thing I usually ask people about, curious, is I often ask about self-care. And I always wonder how, you, Rebecca, you take care of yourself and you implement self-care into your life.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Because I do think it's so important as a therapist to really like practice what we preach because we have to take care of ourselves because we're taking in a lot and we're talking about heavy things every single day. And really, we need to make sure that our container is open and ready to take on. So, and specific to relationship and couples dynamics, I've worked out some great things with my husband where every weekend he takes all of our children out of the house for 2 to 3 hours in the morning so that I can do whatever feels appropriate, whether it's working out or calling a friend or family member or getting housework done or laying around and watching a show. Absolutely my time. I'm completely unplugged from my kids unless there's an emergency. And my husband just takes them and does it. And that's really excellent. Something that we worked out a long time ago. So that's a big piece of self-care for me. I also absolutely love and will shout from the rooftops about the benefits of like meditation and deep breathing and making time for that, even as a busy person. You're It's an opportunity to reset your nervous system and be in a space of a calm nervous system for a little bit. Outside of that, I really focus on health. I eat healthy. I cook most meals at home when I can. I'm very much about nourishing and taking care of myself and my body so that I have the energy to be all of the things that I am and do all of the things that I do and not get burned out by it.
Mm-hmm. I have maybe a strange question, but where does he take them?
Yeah.
I need ideas.
For sure. Yeah. They have like a park circuit that they run.
Oh,
where
you
they'll
guys are
stop
in
by a couple
Cali
of
though,
different
too,
parks.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You got
We can
nice
be
weather all
outside.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's bad weather, he'll take them to an indoor mall.
Okay.
And he also just takes them to run errands.
Yeah. Yeah. How old are your kids?
I'll take them to Rite Aid or the grocery store. I have an almost 4-year-old, a 10-year-old, and then my stepson is 13. So we
Wow.
have a big spread.
Yeah. 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 Nice. Okay. Yeah, because my husband and I have done the thing on the weekends where I sleep in one morning, he sleeps in the other, but they're still in the house. It's like,
Yeah.
I can hear you. It's like
Yeah.
still stressful sometimes.
Totally. There's something about being in your own house and being able to relax that
Yeah.
as a parent is really, really special. And so, yeah, the getting out of the house piece for me was necessary. I didn't want to leave the house because then I'm trying to make up stuff to do.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm like, well, what if I just want to lay on the couch and watch a show? Like, I deserve to have my home to myself.
Yeah. Well, and I would say to him too, because at first, yeah, we would send me out of the house, but then I'd come home and it would be like, well, how much did you spend? I'm like, well, what else am I supposed to do? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to Target. I'm going wherever. I'm getting a coffee, and it's like, $300 later just for some alone time. So it's like, we gotta switch this up a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. So like parks or play places, or even if they're just driving around, I do not care as long as I have my peace and quiet.
Yeah. 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 All right. Well, Rebecca, is there anything that you would have asked yourself or wanted to mention about anything we talked about today that I didn't think to bring up?
I can't think of anything. I think we covered some really important stuff.
Anything you want to drive home or leave people with?
Yeah, just don't hesitate to reach out to a therapist. Therapist can be a lot of things. Therapy can be a lot of things. It can be long term, it can be short term, it can be individual, it can be couples. And also finding a therapist that you really click with, because therapists have personalities, they are human, they have different ways of working. I meet a lot of people that have had one bad experience and they never go back for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So spend some time calling different therapists, chat with them on the phone for a few minutes, see what they're like, see if you can look at a website or social media or get more of a feel for their personality, and just make sure that it's somebody that you feel comfortable with and feel like they're listening to you, and that you feel comfortable if something doesn't work for you, that you could share that back with them. And just finding the right fit is really important and can be huge in, growth and healing.
Well, thank you so much for your time. As I mentioned, I've not covered a lot of this with anyone yet, so I really appreciate it. And hopefully, I think we can just keep having these conversations. Like I said, my heart breaks for those people that are kind of living in the shadows of some of these issues and struggles, because I think they're way more common than we realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed the conversation and the questions.
Thank you. Okay, so the way I think about this conversation is heavy but vital. Whether or not you've experienced infertility or a miscarriage, Rebecca's insight on the pain points and challenges of couples who do, I think is important for everyone in the world to know about. It breaks my heart to think of women and couples living in the shadows because these topics aren't always acceptable to talk about. I do think the points Rebecca made about grief are so critical to this conversation. I'm going to hypothesize, this is based on nothing but my own thoughts, that if you polled random people on the street about whether or not they think it should be comfortable for women and couples to discuss their challenges with infertility and miscarriage openly, if they choose to, because it would help them, I bet most people would say, sure, yeah. But I wonder how many people's next thought would be, but don't talk to me about it. And I'm coming at this not from the perspective of people are jerks, but because societally, culturally, we're so uncomfortable with pain. We're so uncomfortable talking about grief, sadness, and something like infertility is a topic that most of us don't seek out information on unless we have to, right? You know, this show started and still very much is about me helping the person I was a few years ago before I started therapy. And keeping that oversimplified understanding of my show in mind, I once had someone ask me, in order to gain some clarity, you know, if that's the case, if that's who you're talking to, then why are some of the topics covered on your show not anything you've gone through or likely ever will? And to that I say, I've learned that how we make this world a better place is to start with ourselves, which is why therapy is just, I love it. And, you know, so we have to do all this work on ourselves, but in doing so, in my experience, that gave me a greater just like bucket of empathy that I want to share with others. So I hope you listen to these conversations and maybe you directly relate and maybe you don't, but I guarantee you know someone or love someone who can relate. And if we can all better understand and empathize with each other, then I think we're really onto something. All right. So, Rebecca, thank you so much for your expertise. I know you validated a lot of women, moms, and dads on the show today. Yes, Dad Talk finally made a significant appearance on the show. That is, I don't know if I'm going to say it's a first, but it's certainly the most time we've ever dedicated to the dad. So, thank you for all of your insight, all of your knowledge, and thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.